Those that are bilingual, what have you heard from others that don't realize you can understand them? Hard to describe, but I thought it was adorable. I was at a weekend retreat for people studying sign language. It was held at a residential school for the deaf and the children were away at home, but a few teenagers were hanging around. A couple of the teen boys were trying to flirt with a girl. I wasn't paying close attention, and I'm not fluent anyway, but I could tell one boy was asking the other boy to talk to the girl for him, probably because he was too shy to talk to her himself. Finally I oversaw the boy ask her, "What is your weight?" The girl looked confused and a little disgusted. He repeated the question. The first boy slapped the second boy's hands away and emphatically signed, "What is your name?" The girl was happy enough to answer that, and I was glad none of them could hear me laugh out loud. I started dating a girl and decided I'd learn her language, Punjabi, but I obviously didn't tell her because I wanted to keep it a surprise. Anyways, that's how I found out she was cheating on me, because I overheard her conversation with her friend. 8 months of effort gone in vain. I'm French. I was in New York City, on top of the Empire State Building, and a young couple was standing next to me admiring the view. The guy turns to his GF and says in French, "I need to S so bad." I couldn't not laugh. Had a customer speaking Korean, and I heard them say the coffee was good, and I said thank you in Korean. They were super nice and tipped more than I thought they should have. I grew up in Thailand and can speak fluent Thai, but I'm mixed race, so I look pretty white. This happened when I was about 14 and wearing red lipstick for the first time. I was coming home on the SkyTrain. This older lady turned to her husband and basically said that foreigners always dress like S and that she feels sorry for my parents for raising such a degenerate. Luckily my Thai mom called to ask which station I had gotten to, so I was just talking to her in perfect Thai. The woman's face was priceless. I kinda wish I had some witty retort before I got off the train, but I was really shy and didn't really stand up for myself at that age. My great-grandmother, great-grandma and grandma were in an elevator. Two women started speaking in Yiddish. "Oh, look at the poor washerwoman." As my great-grandmother got off, she turned and said, "I can understand everything you said. Be nice." I was working downtown in the US, in a part of the city that is mainly tourists, and waited on a Chinese family one day. The restaurant is the equivalent of a sit-down chain like Olive Garden. I greeted them in English, and they responded in English, so I figured that this would be the best method of communication, since they did not ask if I spoke Cantonese. Once I moved on to my next table, I heard the mother tell the father that it is such a shame that my parents worked so hard for me to not speak Cantonese and work at a restaurant. I went through the whole meal speaking in English, and at the end as I was handing them the bill, I said in Cantonese that it was a pleasure serving you, and I hope you come again soon. The mother's face dropped, and she thanked me profusely and left a decent tip. I might speak English well, but I also know how to work the Chinese guild. Used to teach in Korea in a fairly small town. Some kids I taught told me about their grandma. She saw a black man at the train station and muttered at him in Korean to go wash his skin. She, of course, assumed there was no way he spoke Korean, but he immediately answered back in Korean, "Don't hate, grandmother." She was so shocked and embarrassed she just stood up and left the station. Took the afternoon train instead. It happens to me all the time because I look Middle Eastern when I'm really Hispanic. I was working at a coffee shop and two Hispanic men came in talking mad bad about our food and confused about the menu. Right in front of me the guy's like, "Let's ask this guy. What's this camel gonna know about anything here? I guess camel is a slur for Middle Eastern or something." I responded in Spanish, and it was backpedal o'clock. So not me, but a friend of mine. So he is a manager in a kitchen, and when he got this sweet gig in a new kitchen it was like 90% Cuban women. Now my friend is straight up Irish, red hair, pale skin with freckles, green eyes, totally a white boy. His mother though was a Spanish teacher and raised him to speak fluent Castilian Spanish. Well, for his first 2 weeks the ladies talked a lot of smack about him in Spanish to each other and totally dissed him non-stop. He decided to let it roll, and when the 2 weeks was up he held a big meeting with them all to go over the changes he was gonna make. He held the whole meeting in Spanish, and he said every woman's face just dropped and went bright red. Lol, needless to say they stopped talking smack in Spanish. Very innocent comment towards my dad, but regardless they clearly didn't think I could understand them. I once overheard some middle-aged guy say that my dad looks like the oldest kid from the Brady Bunch if he grew up in Spanish. My dad was down the aisle getting something, and I was manning the cart and they were semi-near me. I just start laughing because my mom had a crush on Greg from the Brady Bunch as a kid, so it was perfect. Even my dad's name is Greg. No one was offended, but the guys did look scared for a minute. I speak Mandarin. Heard some weird bad "I wouldn't marry you if you owned all the kittens in the world" overheard in a restaurant was great. But I also speak some French, and while in Baltimore airport, I overheard a little girl who was pointing at a huge ass praying mantis on the window and say, "It's not going to come on the airplane, is it?" Adorable. American who works abroad. It always baffles me how some American tourists seem to think that nobody else in the world speaks English. The one that comes to mind was at a train stop where some tourists who were clearly American were talking about how smelly everyone in the country was. Tourist A mentioned that tourist B should keep her voice down, and tourist B replied, "Why? None of them know what I'm saying." A guy standing behind them piped up with something like, "Pretty much all of us speak English." The tourists' faces dropped, and they were silent until the train came. It was excellent. In high school I spoke Spanish fairly well. It was not common for that time, and for my area. A family was buying groceries, and as I was ringing up the items the father said he has not seen the stuff on the bottom. Don't get it. I rang up what was on the belt and sat there. After a few moments I asked about the stuff on the bottom. They would not look at me for the next 2 minutes or so of the transaction. I was sitting in an Uber pool. Two Korean guys from a music school were in the back seat. While I was in the front they were discussing X at first, but then they started talking about women in a super disparaging way. Things like, "You have to try a white girl at least once. They're different. If you just play music for them, they'll take their clothes off, except the rated R version." The Uber algorithm decided I should be dropped off first. The one asked his friend, "Where are we going?" In Korean I answered in English, "He's dropping me off first." They said "Oh" in unison, then quickly changed the subject to, "Hey, have you eaten yet, LMAO?" In high school, I spent a month in Germany as an exchange student. The family had a son my age. Everyone I met commented on the fact that they had never met an American who could speak German until they met me. One night shortly after I arrived, I was at a party. Two girls about my age sat down close to me and started talking. I tried to look oblivious. Girl 1, in German, "Isn't that the American boy staying with Peter?" Girl 2, German, "Yes. He's rather cute." "Yes." Girl 1, German, "Yes. I'm going to say something." Girl 1, English, "Hey, aren't you the American staying with Peter? I'm Birgit, and this is Hild." Me, in German, "Yes, I am. It's nice to meet you both." They both turned bright red. It was one of the funnest trips I've ever had. Sometimes my students forget I speak Russian and start saying stuff that is way inappropriate for English class. The best was when this one boy, who always finishes his work early and fidgets around with things, was pretending to swallow a pencil. Another boy, who thinks he's very funny, said in Russian, "I always knew you could deep throat." That kid turned a beautiful color when I reminded him I could understand. I'm ethnically Chinese, but grew up learning German. I was in Germany for student exchange and attended a dorm party one night. Two German guys at the party started flirting with me and openly discussed who would be able to sleep with me that night. Played dumb and rejected both their advances. A week later at another party I conversed with other friends in fluent German in front of them. Their expressions were priceless. I was eating at a restaurant in Quebec, where seriously everyone speaks at least some English who isn't super old, and a couple who only spoke English sat there and be about everyone around them, as if no one could understand a word they were saying. It was crazy, because we were speaking English, albeit not so obnoxiously loud as to draw everyone's attention, as they were a couple of tables over. Anyways, it was embarrassing for them at first. Then downright terrible as they even made fun of their waitress right in front of her. Eventually a manager came out and basically told them to F off. But as they went, people were commenting loudly in English, and I'm surprised people didn't actually clap. Not me, but a teacher of mine. Teacher, who spoke both fluent French and fluent German, was on a horse-drawn tour of a city, sitting in the center row of the carriage. A French couple sat in the rear row, and a German couple with small children sat in the front. The children were tired and cold and making a small fuss, but nothing outrageous. The French couple started insulting the parents and children in French, snidely. The German family didn't speak French and had no idea what was going on, trying to soothe their children and enjoy the ride. Teacher scolds the French couple in French, saying something along the lines of, if you two better people ever manage to hold this relationship together, you'll likely be in the same situation one day. Show some decorum. Teacher then turned to German couple and, in German, reiterated what the French were saying about them and what he said in return. The German couple asked him to convey their apologies. Their hotel room wasn't ready and the children hadn't eaten yet, and they were killing time until they could check in. That they were sorry for disrupting their evening. Teacher did. French couple looked embarrassed. Teacher spent the rest of the evening visiting with the German family in German.